George Zimmerman, his family, and his handful of would-be supporters have contradicted themselves and each other from the very beginning. Yet no one in the media points this mountain of contradictions out. Now, if it was the Martins who'd had a ton of inconsistencies, do you think the media would have overlooked that? The media is as opposed to arresting Zimmerman as Bill Lee was. The media is also opposed to reporting the deaths of black children because they have their own internal racist ideology, and since the public has forced them to cover this story, they are now retaliating by smearing Trayvon, telling lies, spreading any and all rumors about him off the internet, and reporting them as fact. Meanwhile, the media asks no questions whatsoever about Zimmerman's past. They seem curiously uninterested in the guy who murdered a child. If you thought this kind of psychopathic racism was reserved only for sewers like Stormfront, guess again. The kind of callous and racist talking points that you thought only existed on internet message boards are coming out of the mouths of the police and the media, boldly saying to the world that when a black life is taken, the real victims are the white guys. Not one reporter has done a full profile of the killer yet. Not one has initiated a media probe of him. Sure, they give you a couple of details about his criminal past, but have they filed any lawsuits to open up those domestic violence cases he was involved in? Because the Associated Press certainly didn't have a problem using a lawsuit to see if Trayvon Martin had a juvenile record, and when they found out that he didn't, they didn't trumpet this fact. Instead, they acted like it didn't happen, and just moved on to the next racist talking point. Nobody is asking what ties Zimmerman's father, Robert Zimmerman, has to the Sanford Police Department or the state's attorney's office. Zimmerman's 2005 assault charge has been sealed by the court. Did Robert have anything to do with that, or with getting his son's 2 domestic violence charges sealed as well? Nobody has asked Zimmerman's ex-fiancée why she filed charges against him. There are at least 3 individuals who can say George Zimmerman perpetrated violence against them, and yet the media is not interested in talking to any of them. On the other hand, they fell all over themselves publicizing a pitiful letter by Robert Zimmerman, who himself expressed no sympathy with the Martin family. In fact, this goof had the nerve to say at no time did George follow or confront Mr. Martin. Still, the media tried to play it as if we need to feel sorry for Robert Zimmerman, but before you go getting all dewy-eyed over him, I want you to remember there's another father in this case. The father of Trayvon Martin. While George Zimmerman is sitting at home patting himself on the back for having gotten away with murder, Tracy Martin is mourning the loss of his dead son. While George Zimmerman is laughing with his family about how tough he was that night, Tracy Martin is left to try to get on with what's left of his own life. The killing of Trayvon Martin may well not have started out being about race, but it certainly is now, and it's not because of the Martin family or the activists who have come to their aid. This case became about race the instant George Zimmerman, by his own admission, decided that the only reason he needed to stalk and murder Trayvon Martin was that he was black. It became about race when the police chief decided to become an advocate for the murderer. It became about race when the police chief feebly tried to use the race card to take the heat off himself and attempt to play the victim. It became about race when the bigots and racists came out of the woodwork trying to form some online support group for their chosen murderer. It became about race when the media treated Trayvon's death and his life completely the opposite of how they treated the countless white children whose deaths they've covered. George Zimmerman has already fled his home and gone into hiding, but I imagine right about now the walls are starting to close in on him. The more investigations that open against him, the greater the chance that one of them will result in his being arrested and convicted. He wanted to get attention? Well, he's getting it. He is now the most wanted man in America. In the last few days, we've seen the conservatives organize themselves into a defense team for George Zimmerman. They've used their websites and broadcast outlets as a propaganda mill with one purpose: smear Trayvon Martin. They can't say anything good about George Zimmerman because there's nothing good to say, so instead they've been reduced to trolling Twitter, looking for gossip, chatter, anything they can use, anything at all. One of the first attacks came from Michelle Malkin, who decided to copy and paste a lie from some white supremacist website. They claimed to have found pictures of Trayvon Martin, but it turned out they'd gone to the wrong guy's Facebook page. Malkin was forced to admit she'd made a mistake and that the picture was a fake, but that hasn't stopped conservatives and right-wing pundits from continuing to use it anyway. To them, this is war, and they will stoop to any low to win it. And the mainstream media is on the side of the white supremacists. They've covered tons of missing and dead children, but never before have they made the dead child into the focus of the investigation. Never before had they filed lawsuits to find out if the murdered child had a juvenile record. But then again, all the dead children the white media have ever covered have been white.
Would your fellow African-American lawmakers be as concerned about this case if Trayvon wasn't black?
Actually, the real question is, why is the media never concerned about a dead or missing child unless the child is white?
Oh, let me tell you something. We had an incident in my area where a young white female was murdered, and I was just as concerned. Absolutely. I care about all of the children. You know, you can make
Brown,
this...
what was her name?
The young lady that got killed.
Yes, ma'am.
In Orange County.
What was her name?
Yeah, the young lady that got killed. No, the point of the matter is...
Have you ever seen the media interrogate the sheriffs or police chiefs as to whether they can remember the tons of missing and dead black children that they never looked for? And this media whore is doing so as if Congresswoman Brown had committed a crime. A black child is murdered, and CNN is resentful that they have to cover the story, because after all, we never get to hear about all those murdered or missing white children, do we?
I don't remember her name, but we had all kinds of rallies in the community in Jacksonville that I participated in, and I made sure that the sheriff department had the money that they need to pursue the case.
Was it just a memory lapse?
We're talking about the Summers case, and then...
So you do know her name?
Come on. I went to the wake. I participated.
Fuming, she reminds her constituents who are now questioning her role as a congresswoman to remember the check she once wrote the Clay County sheriff during the Thompson investigation.
Before he left my office, he had a check for $10,000. That's what you tell him. Tell them I do my job.
I checked with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and turns out the congresswoman is actually not giving herself enough credit. Sheriff Beasler says he actually received 2 checks totaling $30,000.
Can anyone think of the last time or any time that Brooke Baldwin covered the death or disappearance of a black child? Can you think of any time that CNN had done so before or since Trayvon Martin? Brooke Baldwin is who CNN chose to replace Rick Sanchez with, who you'll recall got fired for making insensitive remarks. Only he made the mistake of making those remarks about Jews instead of black people. When Natalie Holloway went missing in Aruba, I wondered, did the white media ask who she had slept with in the past? Did they ask if she made it a habit to run off with strange men? Did they ask what her emails said, what her Twitter page said, what her friends wrote to her online? Did they ask if she'd ever been suspended from school? Did they ask if she'd ever used drugs? In other words, did they ask if the white victim of a murder had any dirt on her? They have treated Trayvon Martin as if he was the criminal and George Zimmerman as if he was the victim. A lot of black people are surprised that the media is leading the charge in the posthumous lynching of Trayvon Martin, but you shouldn't be. The media has always been the mouthpiece for lynchings in America, justifying the lynchers and demonizing the lynched. The times may change, but these people don't. Now the verdict is in. George Zimmerman is free for the second time. As I had predicted, the prosecution made a sham of a case. Now, when you couple this verdict with the Supreme Court decision declaring that black people are not to be given the vote, at what point does it dawn on you that you're being targeted? How much more evidence would you like to see? Videos like mine don't get much attention because it's not entertaining. That alone should tell you how widespread the problem of black detachment is. We don't know we're in a race war, and we don't want to be told. We cannot think we'll be able to pay lip service to change. All change begins with a strategic assessment, and nowhere else. Anything else is running off half-cocked. As black people, we have been silent and still for far too long. The bodies are beginning to pile up, and now it's our children who are being targeted, with the full support of the media and the state. So, what are you going to do about it? Will you march? Will you rally again? Will you threaten some more, as you've done for 100 years? Action is what the world understands, not gestures. Marching and rallying and talking about what you're going to do counts as activity, not action. You might as well be walking in circles. To get justice in the courts, you must control the judges. I don't care if the judge is black. If you didn't put him there, he is not on your side. You must control the prosecutor's office. If you didn't put that DA in power, then he is not on your side. You must control the police chiefs. If you didn't put them there, they are not on your side. Black people must become not just interested in how the machinery of their society works, but in putting themselves or people they control into positions to directly manipulate that machinery on our behalf. We do not need a level playing field. We want a field that is as lopsided in our favor as possible. What do you call that? You call that justice. As long as our priority is Xbox, NFL, and the Real Housewives of whatever, we are merely on a mass death watch, waiting until some cop or sufficiently bold non-black civilian decides to run up on us with a gun. The reason Trayvon Martin lies dead and his killer has walked free is because Trayvon Martin's people have no power. Trayvon's people are divided and distracted. We don't have the mentality of an army, we have the mentality of self-obsessed hoochie mamas. We are unable to take the hard line against white supremacy because too many of our women, and this includes black mothers for the last 50 years, have been totally dependent on white males for every crumb of their daily bread. They desperately crave to be the pet Negro, even if it kills us all. Our women have totally separated themselves from their own people and taken refuge in a dream world where they can all be some white man's pet slut if they try hard enough. So black women will be of no help or use in the war for African liberation. Get over it. Black men must pursue a group policy of black first, and that policy must be a hyper-aggressive one. It begins with the personal standards we have towards one another. From there, it will naturally extend to all others we come into contact with. I say black first because no one else does. White people don't have to say white first with their mouths. They say it with their actions every single day, as do Asians and Hispanics. The only people who seem to have a problem with putting their own selves first are the people at the bottom, which explains why they're at the bottom. Yes, we must come together. We should have done it 150 years ago, but we cannot and must not rally behind a man, rather behind a unifying group ideology. And there is only one code that can give us prosperity and security and unity. One creed that promises to defend us from our enemies and to gain retribution on any who attack us. One motto that sums up our mentality, actions, and motivations. That simultaneously tells us what to do and how to do it. Black first.